Here at Capcoder, we are delighted to introduce our new and revolutionary all-electric machine. Based on our best-selling Micro Mono, the Micro Mono E eliminates the need for compressed air to operate. And with options such as automatic bottle infeed, integrated filling, and automatic cap placement, it makes the Micro Mono E unique in the industry. Ideally suited for ultra-clean rooms wanting to eliminate any potential contamination of compressed air, or areas where compressed air is not available. The Micro Mono E requires only a standard 13 amp plug to operate. The all-electric version still excels anywhere from small batch work to high output production. Capcoder are excited to demonstrate their best seller, the Micro Mono benchtop filling and capping machine, with unparalleled ease of use, flexibility, and a multitude of configurations. From fully manual to fully automatic operation, the Micro Mono truly does stand in a league of its own. Using the same control system as our flagship Mono, it allows us to incorporate sophisticated technology such as load cells, precision sensors, and tool transducers. It can be integrated with a number of different style fillers, and as well as standard capping, can accommodate styles such as trigger sprays, press-on, and even prick. Originally designed for customers that have a frequent product changeover, the Micro Mono takes advantage of quick release tool, meaning product changeover can take as little as 2 minutes.
Morning, everyone. Just wondering if I'm on live. I think I probably am now. We've got some people here. So I think I'm going to start. It'd be great if someone could give me a thumbs up that you can hear me. I'm assuming you can. Great. Okay, perfect. Right. My name is Tim Phillips. I'm Managing Director from Cbd Intel. Hopefully some of you have heard of us, but we're a UK-based company providing data and regulatory tracking for the CBD sector, very focused on CBD. We do look at the wider cannabis aspects of the industry as well, but we're focused on CBD. I'm going to share my screen with you. We've got about half an hour for a presentation, and then I'm going to take some questions. If any of you want to ask questions as we go, please do. I've got the Q&A panel in the side there, so I can try and pick them up as I go. And if we go to full screen, I'm hoping that you can now see that. I've got to try to get this out of the way. Great. Okay, so I'm here to talk about the UK market. Actually, I'm presenting a little bit of latest data on the UK market. I want to talk a little bit about some of the major issues that are going on in the UK at the moment and put it into a global context. We look at a global market for CBD, huge amounts happening in the US. I think a lot of it not going across into the UK market, but I think some of the themes will be relevant. So we'll talk a little bit about that and some of the other things going on as well. As usual, I'm going to give both a sort of a market view on this and also, like, you know, looking at the regulatory aspects, because they have a massive impact on the way that the market is growing. I'll be very happy to send these slides to anyone if they write me an email. I can send it back, so don't worry about this. A bit of information about Cbd Intel, which you can read in your own time. What are we going to talk about? Well, I guess the theme is right. We're in a post-regulated UK market now. What does that really mean, and what are the changes that are going to happen? And I think it's a future effect, because I don't think a lot of the changes are happening right now, and we haven't seen huge amounts of enforcement, but it's coming. So what are the changes? Well, look, so where are we right now? UK market oils are really very dominant still, but we've had a huge growth in topicals, and I think that's partly a reflection of the regulatory position for those two different products. We can talk about that. In terms of brand distribution and where are brands being sold, we'll talk a little bit about multi-brand retailers, both vape stores and CBD specialist multi-brand retailers versus high street retail. And I think we're seeing a bit of a divergence emerge from those two sides. We'll talk obviously about the novel food process in the UK, but I want to put it into the context of the European novel food process, and also a little bit about what's happening on a global basis to food regulation and CBD and food products. And then we'll talk about the future and what we think is coming up. Okay, so just some context really. And again, I think it's really important, particularly for those of you who are operating just in the UK, it's really important to see how does the UK reflect what's going on in the rest of the world? How does it differ perhaps in some ways to other markets? So here's a start. We're just looking at product categories and brands in those product categories. Now we track about 15 countries, I think, globally. On the left there, you'll see the combination of all the countries that we've got together. And just don't worry about the numbers particularly, but it's more just to look at the formats that CBD is going into. It's still very dominated by oils, as you can see that top bar, both for all countries and for the UK on the right. But what's quite interesting, and we're seeing a big change, is cosmetics and topicals now are really growing, particularly in cosmetics. So we're seeing huge growth in both the UK and the rest of the world. And in fact, CBD products that go on your skin, on the sort of external applications, are really in growth all around the world. So we're definitely going to see that as a theme that's growing right now. All right, brand distribution. I talked about where are we seeing products across the world. On the right there, you're just seeing numbers of brands in each of the categories. Of course, again, oils and tinctures is the dominant sector there. That's the biggest, the square in the boxes on the right, and it clearly goes down in this order really. So it's kind of oral oils and tinctures, so ingested products. We've got cosmetics and topicals as the next biggest category. Vape is another very big category, and then edibles, which I'll talk about separately, is another growing category. Again, it's very dominated, and I think a lot of these products are coming across from the US, but we'll talk about that. In the left-hand side, I just wanted to make this point that I made at the start, really, which is in terms of the retailers that are selling these products, and particularly online. A lot of this data that we're getting here is from online. You'll see that the specialists, both CBD and vape specialists, so multi-brand retailers, that are focused on these product categories, both in vape and CBD. You can see that those carry the largest number of brands at the moment in the UK. When you start to go into the more mainstream retail, particularly health and wellness, Holland Barrett, all of those kinds of products, and the beauty, cosmetic retailers, plus supermarkets and so on, the numbers of brands carried, the range of products, no surprise, I guess, but the range of products are much smaller. And I think what we're starting to see, as I'm going to show here, in terms of some of these brands that you can see overall in the different categories, there are some very well-known brands in these. These are top 5 in each. The top 5 taken from all retailers, and if you look at the names here, and if you compare to the top 5 taken from non-specialist retailers, so much more kind of broad brush high street retailers, the names are very different, and the names coming through are really very, very different types of brands. So we're starting to see certain brands focus very much on high street retailers. That's that's their focus, both online and offline. And then certain brands are really much more focused on the multi-brand retailers and focused on those kinds of things. In actual fact, of course, we're seeing different types of consumers come through those different retail channels as well. I mentioned edibles, and by edibles, I'm talking about anything that's not a sublingual oil, I guess, but that is ingested. In the UK at the moment, we are seeing huge dominance in gummies and candies. So CBD products going into food, which is going to be affected by novel food regulations in the UK, of course. We're still seeing that the gummies and candies sector is the big one, and in fact, other kind of products, chewing gums, mints, all those kinds of things, much more niche at the moment. This doesn't include beverages, of course, which is a separate category all on its own. Just to put it into context, and I'll just go over this quickly, but these are the countries that we've got detailed data for on the left, and just looking across here in terms of numbers, you can just see the numbers of brands that are in each market. I think it's often said that the UK is one of the most competitive markets in the CBD sector at the moment. Of course, it's very different to the US market, and many of you will be operating in the US as well, and will know that. But it's worth remembering that we've got some near neighbours that are also, really quite big markets and are growing. And I think it's always worth remembering. So just looking at some of these, like the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, of course, we've got a lot of products there. Sales are more limited, but I think it's really important just to see the sort of global context of how these work. And again, a brand listing distribution chart. This just again puts the UK into the context of some of its near neighbours, and of course some of the other markets that are big CBD markets around the world. And I think it's interesting just to see these two compare. I think it's probably best that there's a lot of numbers on this. I won't go into it in any detail, but if you want the slides, as I said, I'm very happy to send them to you, and you can look at this in your own time. All right, just again to understand the UK consumer, we did a survey earlier this year, small response base. So again, I think take this as indicative only, but it was some quite interesting things just in terms of the types of products that are coming through, and very clearly oils are still absolutely predominant in terms of consumers and the way that they're using the product. So oils, although we've had this massive rush of new products that are coming into the market and all sorts of different types of iterations and new types of products, oil is still very dominant in the UK market. But as I said before, topicals growing really fast, next biggest category there. And not to forget that vape is growing, and we've seen various vape companies obviously get into the CBD market, but we've also seen some big international companies like BAT launch a CBD vape product in a test market. I think that vape will be a big growth area as well to come. Just again, really, I suppose the context of the novel food regulations that are coming through, I thought it would be interesting just to pull this out. So this was our survey from earlier in the year in the UK of CBD consumers, and we were asking them about their attitudes towards CBD. In fact, lots more questions than this, but I just pulled out these two, which I think are relevant to the novel food thing. So a vast majority of them think that CBD should be no different to vitamins and supplements. And that they should be available in food. So consumers are clearly keen to have CBD available in a food format product, and I think that's that's kind of what's driving a lot of the market at the moment. That consumers are clearly keen on this. Okay, quick rundown on the way that CBD is being treated legally. It's very complicated, and I didn't want to kind of get too much into the detail. There are plenty of people who are far more expert than I am about the intricacies of the application process and so on. I just wanted to put it a bit into context, because clearly pre-Brexit, the UK was part of the European Union and followed the European Union's novel food rules. Post-Brexit, as I'll come on to, we've got our own system, and applications for novel food approval are being done on a UK basis, separate from the EU. But I think it's really important for everyone to be monitoring what's happening in Europe, because two things really. One is I think that the UK will end up, mirroring some of what happens in Europe, and hopefully vice versa. But secondly, that the requirements that the UK are asking for, I think, are going to be reflected in the UK and vice versa. And I think, my personal view is I think there's a distinct advantage for companies in the UK who've gone through a novel food process in the UK. I think they're going to be at a very big advantage when it comes to trying to get through a European novel food process as well. A lot of the learnings that the UK will have gone through slightly earlier than the European Union, I think that will help in the process of getting products approved. Just to touch on some of these things, so I think gone are the days where people are still arguing that CBD is not a novel food. We've got through that. The industry in general, even though you may not agree from an ethical perspective or whatever, but I think that the industry has grudgingly accepted that CBD is going to be a novel food and will require novel food approval. We've got enforcement at the member state level, but a pan-European approval process through EFSA, the European Food Standards Agency. It runs very similarly to the FSA in the UK, but it's obviously monitored by the European Commission. And there were some problems. So as many of you will know, in June 2020, the European Commission froze all applications for novel food while it decided whether CBD was a narcotic or not. So there's lots of problems suddenly where lots of applications were plunged into uncertainty while the Commission decided whether or not CBD was a narcotic. We had the Cannabis Ruling, many of you know that very well, at the end of last year. And that helped to push the European Commission to resume applications and monitoring the applications. So we've resumed the process in Europe now. We've got a number of applications that have been validated. I think I'm right in saying that they're all still for synthetic CBD products. And a number of companies have gone through a series of iterations of being asked for more information from the European Commission. I think where we are on timings for novel food approvals in Europe, I suspect we're further back than the UK. I think we're not going to see anything certainly until next year. And my understanding is this is going to be quite a long drawn out process, simply because the European Commission can ask for more information and stop the clock on any of these applications. So it's still going to take a while. The big difference, of course, between the UK and Europe, technically, not perhaps in reality, but technically, is that while products are going through a novel food approval process, they cannot be sold. They are not legally able to be sold in European markets. Very different in the UK, of course, where the UK was made the decision that they were going to allow products that were going through an application process to stay on the market. So a big difference in Europe. It's led to many problems around European markets. We're still not seeing particularly effective enforcement of those rules, and we clearly have markets with plenty of CBD products in them. But just to make that point, that technically there are still problems with that. Okay. In the UK, I think many of you will have read this to death, I suspect. But as you know, post-Brexit, the UK Food Standards Agency were accepting applications from the 1st of January this year. Many companies got in immediately. They've got the application process ready. They've been discussing with the FSA and the FSA and were ready to go right from the start. The deadline was 31st of March. We think many hundreds of applications have gone into FSA. There are very few products that have been put onto the validated list by the FSA as approved products. And I don't think that's changed. I didn't check it today, but I don't think there's very many more than were validated earlier this summer. So we haven't moved on dramatically since the sort of early summer, where we knew that a small number of products have been validated, but certainly not reflective of all those hundreds of brands that I showed you in previous slides that are existing in the UK market at the moment. So we assume that most of those have got applications into the FSA and they're waiting to get validated, and then we'll get through this process of trying to understand what further requirements the FSA will be asking for, what extra data will be required, both in terms of toxicology data and other testing and so on. So all in all, I think where we are on this, we don't see novel food approvals likely until next year. I think it will take a long time. I think in the meantime, though, really important to stay in touch with the FSA to understand the process that they're going through. And of course, if you've got an application in and they're asking for more information, to be on top of that process. As I said, this last bullet point, impact on the EU in general, I think it's worth remembering that the UK is likely to be the first market that has a regulated novel food CBD market in place. And that's going to be really important. That ultimately, that's going to give a huge competitive advantage to companies that have gone through and really understand the process. It's going to give them a massive advantage in terms of how to deal with the regulatory process. This is something that lots of very big companies in pharma and tobacco and so on have got, years and years of experience at. And I think the CBD industry needs to catch up that kind of level of expertise in terms of regulatory compliance. But it will also be, I think, a much easier process to convince a regulator in another market if you've already got through the UK food standards, novel food standards process. So I think it's going to be advantageous for many companies in the UK. Just to put it into context, look, this is just a page pull from one of our charts tracking CBD regulation around the world. Just in terms of food, it's worth pointing out that there was quite a lot of red there, which is very strict or bans on CBD going into food products. And the reality, of course, is that this is constantly changing, and so the regulations around CBD are constantly changing as the market adapts, and I think as government regulators start to understand the sector a bit better and understand the risk profile of CBD going into food. But it's important to remember, despite the fact that many of us I know are tearing our hair out about the difficulties of getting through a novel food process in the UK, it's worth remembering that at least there is a way through. There's a path through to a regulated product in the UK, and that's not the case in many other markets. All right, I think this is my last time. Yeah, that's fine. I'm on time. So what are we looking at for CBD this year and going forward? I think perhaps I'll ignore some of the bullet points to start with and just tell you, my view about where CBD is. It's a bit flatlined. It's been a bit sort of flat for a while now. I think that's partly to do with the impact of COVID and the problems we've had with retail and so on. I think though that the problems for CBD existed before that. And we started to see a decline to certainly prior to that. What I'm quite excited about though is the fact that we've got the sort of ingredients. If you new growth, I'm worried that you can't hear me anymore. Hold on a minute. This has stopped working. I'm back to my normal computer microphone. I hope you can hear this. Probably won't be very nice, but anyway, I'll just finish off. So yeah, my point, and bearing in mind that as a company we've covered a number of other markets, and we're best known, I guess, for covering the vape market in a sister publication called eCig Intelligence. When vape first came around, the market grew hugely, but it was fairly disorganized. The markets were very disorganized. What we had was a European piece of legislation that got brought in. Many of the industry found it very, very difficult to start with to comply. There were lots of, question marks around whether any companies would survive. What we've ended up with in vape, I think, is a regulated market, which has actually allowed many companies to really grow. And I think that's what we're about to see in CBD. It's going to take some time, and it's agonizing to get there. But I think when we get through a regulatory process, particularly for food products in the UK, and then when that starts to
move out to other markets, and we start to get a very clear set of rules for these products, I think that's when consumer confidence is going to come back into the sector, and we will grow. So I am quite optimistic, and I think that's partly shown by some of the other sort of much bigger businesses that are starting to move into this category, namely, some of big tobacco that have been talking about it over the last few months in some of their investor announcements and so on. I think we're going to see this grow because bigger businesses are starting to see it as a mainstream product ingredient, and they're going to be putting it into some of their products. So I've no doubt that it will come out of this slight slump, and I think by the end of the year and next year, we're really going to see a boost once we start to see a regulated environment and big companies come in. I think that's going to be good. And I think it will also kind of, the tide will lift for lots of the smaller niche brands that are, that are really important for many consumers, and that will allow consumers to kind of get back some confidence that perhaps they've lost. Okay, so just a final few bullet points. I'll just knock these on the head. So as I said, in Europe, what's going on this year is all around novel food. That's the big kind of area of interest, both in the UK and the EU. It's going to take some time. Some of these things are going at different rates. Interestingly, in the EU, we're seeing massive growth in flower sales, particularly through tobacconists and so on. It'll be really interesting to see how that interacts with some of the new legislation around combustible products that are coming through in the Tobacco Product Directive, for example, which is starting to be negotiated at a European level. But for CBD, I think it's all around novel food this year. In the US, it's all about delta rates. Everything I talk to anyone about in the US at the moment is pretty much focused on delta rate and the future of delta rate and the regulation of delta rate. Not a big issue at all in Europe. It's not a product that exists in Europe pretty much. And I think the same could be said for sort of minor cannabinoids. It's talked about a lot in the industry, and particularly in the US. I don't think it's an issue that's of particular relevance for Europe at the moment. We've got some international things going on. So you can see there, China ban on CBD and cosmetics. We've got a lot of other restrictions coming through. There's a whole issue around supply. I mean, basically, another thing that's been going on is massive oversupply in biomass from the US markets, and we've seen, basically overproduction and huge amounts of biomass sitting around ready for extraction. I think we're going to see that come out, and particularly now that we're going to start to get some regulation into the system, then I think it's very clear that that we've sort of hit a low point in terms of the supply side. Niche consumer segments, I haven't talked about that a lot, but CBD is very much going into particular types of problems. So clearly, most of it's used in things like anxiety products or pain relief products. I think we're starting to see that evolve into very niche product categories where people are producing products that are either for sports injuries, as you can see there, or particular medical pain relief issues. And then last point, as I said, we've got big business coming in, particularly tobacco. We've got BAT talking about their launch of a CBD vape product recently. But much more importantly, in a way, is all of these tobacco companies are now looking beyond tobacco. They're looking at products that are functional, that they see themselves being able to monetize. And the pharmaceutical industry as well is following up with that, very interested in it. I think, by the way, that's for lots of small companies, that's a sort of a horrific prospect of massive companies coming into this sector. I don't think it has to be by any means, and I think we're always going to see niche products for niche consumer demand. So I think that, as I said, I'm positive about the future of the sector, and I'm very positive about it from the end of this year when we start to get some regulation into the system. So that's it for me. I'm now going to look at this and see if I can look at some of the questions. Oh, there's a very good first question. Can I? Where do I think the CBD market will be in 5 years' time? So look, I don't know. I think it will be regulated, is my first point. So I think there will be some clear rules as to what you can and can't do. I think that's going to be good for the sector, in the sense that companies, manufacturers, brands will know what the rules are and how to operate. And I think that consumers will also be much more confident that what they're buying is what it says it is, and it does what it says it will do. So that's the general point. It will be regulated in 5 years' time. Where will it be in terms of what consumers are doing with the products? I think what we're seeing is that CBD will be one of a number of functional products, and that consumers will be using them for very specific purposes. So gone are the days where people are just like buying CBD as a shot in a cappuccino because they think it's cool. But it'll be a very niche product. It will be bought for very specific purposes. And the type of consumer for a CBD sports injury cream is going to be very different to the consumer who buys a CBD sublingual oil for sleeping. So I think we're going to see some very specialist products, but I think we're going to see it come into the mainstream as a regulated environment. Yeah. Do I think Facebook and Google will relax their policies on advertising CBD? Don't know. I think it's going to. I think it's going to take some time, and it's going to depend on the way that the regulations develop. I can see them doing so, by the way, if the market is regulated and they can get some confidence that the products are legal. I think right now they are very uncertain. By the way, I think they're much more likely to say yes to CBD compared to yes to nicotine vape, which is the other sector that we look at. So I'm almost sure that if the regulations come in and get enforced, that they will allow advertising. But it may take a number of years, maybe a 5-year outlook, right? Future CBD marketing, I think that's kind of slightly the same thing. What I feel about CBD in general is that it's a product category that has none of the sort of negative associations that say nicotine does. And so I think from a marketing perspective, regulators are much more likely to allow CBD to be advertised and marketed compared to vape, which is frankly having lots of problems at the moment. So I think I think it will be open to allowing marketing. I suspect that'll start much more in the US than it does over here. But at some point, you can imagine a future where it's allowed to be freely advertised. So access to support networks for those who struggle with the novel food approval. I mean, I think this is a really difficult one. There are clearly associations which are representing various parts of the industry that are trying to do that, but I still think that there are gaps, and there are companies that are left out. Look, what I would say about the whole novel food process is it's still really uncertain how it will end up. It's looking like it's unlikely that a brand that has not gone through the novel food approval process will be allowed to exist. But there may well be some white label products that are, that get approved in some way. So I think, anyway, support networks, I don't really have the answer to that. I'm afraid it's really for the industry to get together and try to share some of these costs on compliance. So look, recommendations, I mean, I think that's, what I would say is make sure you stay on top of the changes that are happening and make sure that you're in discussions with the regulator. What's going to be worse, I think, is if you just bury your heads and carry on selling when all around you companies are going through the approval process. I can't answer the questions about where to source CBD. I'm afraid that's for someone else to look at. Well, let's see. Delta 8. I'm just going to quickly deal with Delta 8. I think, look, very clearly in Europe, it's not a phenomenon because Delta 8 exists in the US because of a regulatory loophole. I mean, in one sentence, that's why Delta 8 exists. That there is not a similar loophole in Europe, and therefore it won't be tolerated. It's not allowed. I think the future of Delta 8 is fairly uncertain in the US, I would say as well. There are still, it's really complicated because clearly on a federal level, Delta 8 is not allowed. On a state by state level, as exists for other cannabis products, particularly THC containing, Delta 8, arguably is allowed, but I think many in the industry are very worried about it, and many, particularly in the CBD sector, are worried about it. Partly because it's having a big impact on the sales of kind of adult use THC containing products in the US, and partly because it's not quite clear, what else would, what does this lead to? If you allow Delta 8, then should you allow Delta 10? Plus, by the way, a lot of the Delta 8 products that are appearing in the US market often contain a lot of Delta 9. So a lot of the products that are clearly not allowed. So suddenly, through the back door, you're allowing a product that is very similar to Delta 9 onto a consumer market. So I think the future of Delta 8 is limited, but it just shows what happens when you leave regulatory gaps in markets, and they get filled by consumer demand. Of course they do. So I don't see Delta 8 in Europe and the UK. I don't think it's something to think about for the UK market. It won't be tolerated, absolutely not, and it will be stamped out before it even starts. Good. I think I've come to an end. Look, there's a question about finding out more about CBD business and CBD market information. Do look at the CBD Intel website. There's quite a lot of free information there. I know a lot of it's behind a paywall. I'm sorry about that, but that's how we run our business. It's we only get paid for the data. So do have a look at the free stuff. You can do a trial where you can get some information. And I think then, the next step for getting information on the market is to make sure that the associations that you're members of and so on, they are, they're looking for this information. And most important of all, of course, you want the regulators to get good data on the market that they're trying to regulate. You're not going to get good regulations unless those that set up the laws understand the markets they're trying to regulate. So I think those are my answers. Will cannabis ever be legalized in the UK? Yes, definitely. The question is not will it, it's the timescale. And is the timescale 25 years or is it 2 years? And I think many people invested in cannabis on the basis that it was the latter, and I think it's more likely to be the former. I think we're talking tens of years before THC containing products are legalized in Europe. Good. Right, I think I'm running out of time, guys. As I said, please do get in touch, and I've got my details here. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to send you the slides. And if you've got any questions on some of this stuff that I was talking about, then please get them over. Happy to talk. And thanks very much, CBD Live, for hosting me again today. Lovely to be back. One day soon, I hope, we'll all be actually physically together live. That'd be really nice. But for now, thank you very much. Nice to be speaking, and hope to see all of you soon. Bye bye.